Hey, model railroad fans. Well, I've always said I'm not really a how-to guy, and when I did that turntable build, or that series of turntable build videos, it got more hits and more likes than anything that I've ever uploaded in the last 6 months. So I'm assuming there's an audience out there for people who like to watch people build stuff. I'm going to steal a line from another YouTuber. I don't remember who it was that said, but I'm not going to be a how-to guy, but I'm going to show you how I do. And I'm pretty happy with the results of most of what I have done and what I've learned how to do. And so I'm perfectly willing to share it with others. I've looked online, I've looked on the YouTube and everywhere else, and I have not found anybody doing any kind of video on building this blue sky company. And I'm very excited to do this. This is the last major structure on this portion of my railroad, this first module that I'm building. When I complete this, all I will have left to do is one small shanty in the yard area and possibly a crossing shanty at grade crossing, and then some static grass and weeds and, you know, all the little detail work that comes along. But I am at the light at the end of the tunnel portion of this first module, and this is the last big part of that. So I'm going to video this. I'm going to do a lot of fast forward motion the way that I did in the turntable build, because I'm going to put probably, I don't know, I'm going to guess 30-40 hours into this build. It's a pretty major undertaking. The thing is like 30 inches by 12, something like that, give or take. Blue Sky Company is, even in Brett's description of it, it's kind of a ubiquitous kind of building. It's been several things in its lifetime. The main thing in this building is this, or the main thing that I'm going to be focused on is this little country store gasoline pump area. And if you've been watching my videos, you see that I'm going to put this thing so that my road runs up this side of the building, or actually it will be turned like this, runs up that way. But this building is backwards to the way that I need it. So one, I think, interesting thing that I'll be doing on this video is I'm going to build this kit in reverse from the way that it is designed to be built. And I've put the wall structures together, and I've come to realize that really nothing is going to be changed noticeably. In other words, all my outside walls are going to still work as outside walls, and interior walls are still going to work as interior walls. I hope, fingers crossed. You know, this is one of those things, if I've forgotten something, I may get halfway through this build and realize that something's not going to work, and I'm going to have to sort of scratch build my way out of it. But I think it's going to work. I just have to remember to do everything backwards from the way that the instructions lay it out. Now, this is not an official unboxing because I've unboxed it. I have perused my way through the manual and sort of got in my head what comes next. And really, Brett's manuals are very comprehensive. They'll show you how to do every single thing that needs to be done as far as weathering and the build itself. A lot of it is very repetitive, though. So while these manuals are quite detailed and quite thick, a lot of it, once you've built one of the Sierra West structures, a lot of this is repetitive information about how to weather the wood, how to build knot holes into the wood, and so forth. So I'll be doing all that, and I'll be doing it on camera, because there are a few videos out there of these techniques, but you know, like I said, nothing specific to this large project. So looking forward to this. Hope you'll stick around for the ride. It's definitely going to be a multi-part video. I imagine it's probably going to take me a month of videos to complete this, if even that. So hang on. I'm about to go into fast forward motion in just a moment, and we will start unboxing this box and show you what's up next. Let me show you, though, all of the Sierra West kits do not come with these prefabricated walls. The truck repair shop that I just built, I had to literally cut and install every single stud, every single cross member. It did come with the prefabricated top and bottom plates so that everything lined up correctly. But this, this is many hours work. If you look at all these wall structures in here, if this had been the truck repair, I would have spent 34, 40 hours trying to put these wall structures together, I can assure you. But the way that they have been prepared in here, these are all laser cut, and I don't know what you can see, but I mean, every single 2x is cut and engraved out, so it looks like the entire thing has been stick built. So all I'm going to have to do to these wall structures is just do some colorization of them with the chalks and weathering and so forth. So that'll be a big part of the first part of this. And so there's all my wall structures. It comes with many of these full-size templates. This is the main building itself. This is not even the entire diorama. There's another whole section over here that comes about that far out. It's a tractor repair area over here that's kind of open air with some really cool machinery in it. And there's many more of these diagrams, and they're all meticulously laid out and the correct size and shapes and so forth. So it's very easy to lay your things on there and get things exactly right. Just a plethora of white metal castings, 3D printed objects, just all sorts. And one thing about these Sierra West 3D printed and metal castings is you don't have to deburr, you don't have to do sanding, you don't have to do anything. When you get these from Brett, they are ready to be weathered, painted, whatever you're going to do to them right out of the box. There's a section of the structure that's already cast for brick. It is signed by Carl Allison in 02. This is one of his designs that Brett is using. Then you have your bags that are numbered, which is really nice. I've had some kits where everything came in one bag, and you really got to get out the ruler and measure to see which piece of wood they're talking about. The Sierra West kits have everything bagged up, and then an inventory of exactly what they are: 2x6s, 2x3s, 2x8s, 2x4s, etc. And you can tell by the length of the pieces of wood most of the time what those pieces of wood are. So, and you just don't open one bag until you're ready for it, so you don't start getting things mixed up along the way. Some wires, pins, cables, chains, that kind of thing. And then black paper, I assume that's going to be for part of the roofing. So that's what we're looking at. And I'm going to get these things put back in here and begin making my way through the instruction manual. And like I said, I'll put on some music and do a lot of this in fast forward, and hope you enjoy it. I'll interrupt this portion of the fast motion to sort of explain what I've done here. I'm starting out with, this is the siding for the barn section, which is the oldest section of this building, and it's supposed to look more weathered, more aged, more decrepit than the rest of the building. So what I'm doing is I'm adding in some scribing in with these fine tooth saws. This one is very fine. This one is fairly fine. It's 18 tooth per inch Sawzall blade. This will really roughen one of these boards up, and I'll be roughening some of them up with this, most of them up with this, and then I'm going to be going back and I'll be going in and scribing like this with an X-Acto knife on various boards in various directions to make it look like marks from saw blade. And that's very effective when you put this weathering chalk on these boards. Those saw blades pick up the chalk really heavy and you get these dark band structures, and it's very effective. And then I'll go through and I'll just that's what I'll get after I've put on the wood grain with these. I'll go back and I'll scrape them down just a little bit with the wire brush and sort of clean them up a little bit so you don't have all little hairs. But what I wanted to explain here is this is not in anybody's instructions. This is something that I made up because when I built my first Sierra West kit with these board-on-board structures, you only generally, unless you know, and there are times when you see both sides of a wall and you have to do both sides of the boards, but I'd say 75 to 90% of the time, you're only going to see one side of the board. And so we're only doing the weathering and scribing and so forth on one side of the board. And I was getting mixed up because really with the naked eye, before you put on the weathering powders, it's not real obvious where you have, I mean, I'm not eating these boards up, okay? If you just look at it from this distance, I can't tell which side I've done until I put the weathering powders on. So what I do is I just take a Sharpie and I go through and I will mark one side of every board. And this is going to be the ultimate inside that's not going to show. So I know from here out, every step in the weathering process, I don't weather any side with the black Sharpie mark on it. So that's just a little housekeeping thing that really helps save time and keeps me from weathering two sides to any one piece, or weathering, you know, putting scribes on one side of the piece and then in turn weathering the other side, which doesn't do any good. So just a little explanation of what's going on in the meantime, and I'll get back to what I'm doing. Okay, so I've got this pile of 2x12s over here that I have already put the wood grain on. But what I decided what I need to do maybe is, because there's so many of those and it's just such a monotonous process, let me just do this small batch. I'm going to make 2 batches out of this and just go through step by step and show you close up what each of these things does to this wood. And I think you'll be amazed at some of the outcomes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide this into 2 batches, and that's generally the way that Sierra West recommends that you do it, and I found it to be really effective way to do it as well. I'll work these at 4 or 5 boards per batch, and I will specifically color with my chalks slightly different variations in each batch. And what's going to happen is I'm just going to build up a big mess here on my glass. Very important, I think, that you work on glass it's going to get messy. And what's going to happen is that mess is just going to translate into the later boards, so that as I go down the, through this big pile of wood, it just starts getting messier and messier, and sometimes darker and darker. And that's okay, because I'm going to just shuffle them when I get through. And I'm going to have some darker pieces. I'm going to have some lighter pieces. I'm going to have some pieces that are grayer, some that are browner. It's just going to be a nice mix of natural colors when I get through doing all of these. So what I've done is I have taken my boards, as I mentioned in the other part of the video, and I've put a little black dot on one side at the end of each of these. The reason for the black dot is just to make sure that when I'm doing the weathering process, I know to do this side and not the other side, and I won't get mixed up, and I'll save some time and not having to go back and do things twice. So I've got 91% rubbing alcohol right here. I've got an old paintbrush. Let's find a good one. I think that'll be a good one. It's got an old paintbrush that I'll be dipping in the alcohol in just a few minutes. Set that aside because I'm not to that step yet. The steps in the process. All right. I'm going to take this very, very fine tooth hobby saw, and I'm going to run it down the length of the boards, and I'm going to create wood grain. So I've found that it's more effective, I think, to go at an angle like this. Sometimes I'll push down a lot on one side and sort of carve out a roundness to that side so that it's not so sharp edged all the way down. I'm pushing down pretty hard, and I'll do different boards. I'll do different varying degrees of this, and you'll find that when you're pushing the saw and when you're pulling the saw, the teeth will react differently. And so you'll get, sometimes you want to spin them around and push both ends. If I get a board that has a messed up end on it, I don't see any here, I'll really take advantage of that messed up end, and I will go to town on it like this. And just to show you, I try to mess up the ends of several of my boards, and I'll make use of that in my wall structure by, instead of having a full board for a wall, I'll use a partial board, and then I'll make sure that this end shows where it butts up against another piece. So that's a fairly good bit of wood texture, grain texture to that piece. So I'll set that aside. Do basically the same thing. So I'm turning the saw, and it's running at an angle too. It's not running straight down the board all the time. So sometimes these boards have grain that runs the length of the board. Sometimes it'll be angled like that. That one was angled, so let's do one the length of the board. Just go all the way down the length of the board like that, all the way toward me. And I'm gonna mess up this end down here, and I'm gonna sort of carve out a little bit of irregularity down the side of that board. All right, so I'm gonna do one more board with this saw. And then I'm going to get this one. This is 18 teeth per inch. It's a metal saw blade like you put in a Sawzall. This is about the finest tooth that you can get for these big blades. And it will eat this wood up in a good way. I mean, if you're doing an older structure, like this is a barn, you know how barn wood looks. This is going to really eat into it. And I'm going straight down there with some wood grain, and then it's changing. It sort of follows where it wants to go sometimes. So it doesn't matter if the wood grain is the same from one end to the other, in my opinion. More variety, the better. Now, you can see that really puts some heavy wood grain in that. So I don't do that on all of them. I'll do it on maybe half or less. But it's a very effective wood grain. And also the angle of the saw. You can do different angles of the saw, and it will grain it differently. So I'm gonna mess up the end of this one, nice and irregular down there. And then I'm gonna drag it down to the other end. All right, two more. I'll make that one a little simpler. The idea is don't do the same thing on any two boards. Give them all their own personality. All right, so that's step one. Step two, I'll go back and I'll brush it a little bit. This gives a finer wood grain on top of the thick wood grain that you've already given it. It also brushes away all the little wood fibers that are sticking out like hairs. We don't want that. That's not very realistic looking. Small hairs, yes, but not these big ones like this. And the more wood grain, the thicker the wood grain that I put in it, the more I have to brush it to make sure I get most of those hairs off. And those are not wanting to come off because I really did that thick on that end. So I'm going to take a little extra time to do that on that piece. And these are the boards that I did first with the finer tooth saw. They're not going to be nearly as hairy as the other. And in reality, if you don't want your wood to be as exposed to the weather and as run down as I'm making mine, you might just want to use mostly a metal brush like this. It will give the wood texture, but it'll be at a much a much finer look. Also, if you're modeling in smaller scales, this is O scale, so I get to do a lot more big things to the O scale wood than you would say in HO. If I were doing an HO model, I wouldn't weather this nearly as deeply as I am, because those grooves would be, in reality, they'd be inches wide. So you have to pay attention to what looks right in your scale. Just going back and finding some of those little wood hairs and brushing them off. Okay, next thing is a very interesting technique where you take your X-Acto and just bore a little hole somewhere in the wood, and then we're going to take a toothpick, dip it in glue, wood glue, stick it in that hole, and let it dry. And once it's dry, I'm going to come back. You can use tweezers, flat tweezers. I found that the rail nippers work just fine for that. I'll just come back and I will nip it off right there. And that head of that toothpick is going to stay stuck in there. And what's going to happen is when you get those weathering powders on there and get these varying colors of degree of weathering, it's going to do differently around this toothpick where the glue is, and it's going to stand out and look like a knot hole. And to accentuate that, you can also take your X-Acto and do a little cut indentation on either side of that knot hole, to give the effect of that rounded wood grain that goes around the knot hole. I know this is very time intensive to do this, and to be honest, I don't do it on all of my models, but I think I'm going to do it on this one. This is going to be like the centerpiece of my layout, so I'm going to take the time to put these knot holes in not every piece of wood, but in many of the pieces of wood I'm going to have knot holes. So that's what I'll be working on next. But as I said, I'm going to do one of these sections at a time. I'm going to do these two batches here in kind of real time. It's not going to be exact real time because I'm going to have to let this glue set up for a few minutes. Put some glue on. So there's that knot hole that I was working with a while ago. I'm going to dip it here. I'm going to stick it right there. And then I'm going to repeat the process. Let's put 2 knot holes in that piece. All right, and I will set that one aside and let those 2 knot holes dry. Let's do another one. See, I'm giving it that, trying to lay the blade down so that it gives that knot hole a little bit of a texture there on the ends of it that looks realistic. There's one. Let's do another one up here toward this end. You know, like most things that we do in these fine details, most people are not going to see these knot holes or pay any attention to them. But anyone who does will be fascinated when they see, if they take the time to look closely. All right, I'm going to do knot holes in 4 of these boards. And then I'm going to do saw marks in the other 4. Show you how to do that. This will be a very knotty. You get 2 knot holes per toothpick. I'll go back and I'll cut these off, and I will reuse these toothpicks, the other ends of the toothpicks, on another board. Let's do 2 of them real close together. This is one of my rougher boards. I'll tell you what, I'm going to do 3. That's going to be an 8. And after you've done all these boards, you get to look at them. You know, like most layouts, you're viewing from 1 or 2 angles, and that's pretty much it. You can take your sort of set your favorite boards aside and make sure that you use them on the side that's going to be most easily seen. Save the others for the back. Or if you have some boards that you don't particularly like the way they turned out, save them for the back. All right, so there's 4 knot hole boards drying. Now let's take the X-Acto knife and do some saw marks. And saw marks are easy. We just pick an angle and very irregularly travel down the board. You can go a little bit at an angle like that if you want some heavy saw marks, or you can hit it flat down, or you can just press into it to give some different variety. So we'll just press that one in, and I'll go down to this end and press in a little bit more, because it would have been the same saw blade that cut both ends of that board. So I think the saw blade marks do need to be similar per board. Let's do this one kind of heavy down toward the end. And then we'll do it sort of heavy toward this end as well. And then this one, we'll put it right down the Okay. All right, I'm gonna let this toothpick dry another 5 or 10 minutes, and then I'll come back and finish this. All right, so my glue has mostly dried. It's dried enough to do this. So I'll just take my nippers, come in and cut these off. I'll leave a little bit of the toothpick protruding from the wood, just because a lot of knot holes, as you've seen, kind of poke out of the wood a little bit. So there's what the knot holes look like. This one is poking out quite a bit, maybe a little bit too much. I'll nip it off just a little bit more. There. It's an interesting little effect. And I will not put knot holes all the way around the building, since it is not going to be a diorama. It's going to be on my layout, and no one's really going to see the back side. So all my knot hole wood will go on the front and maybe a side or 2. All right, so now I will randomly select 4 of these boards, I don't want any 4 that were done with the same saw or the same knot holes. Let me swap that one for this one to be colored exactly the same. I want as much variety as I can get in all of this. So next step, choose some weathering chalks. My building is going to have a couple of shades of brown. It's going to have some gray, maybe some white, a couple of shades of gray, and very occasionally I will throw in some black, but you have to be careful with black because black really does a job on coloration, and it will overpower all the other colors that you're using. That's a popular color as well. I'm sorry I don't have the labels on these anymore to tell you exactly what colors they are. They are basically the colors that are suggested in the Sierra West manuals. Look those up online probably and see what colors are recommended. But here's what we do. We'll take, these are very high quality artist chalks, by the way. They're not the off the shelf kind at the hobby store. These are Rembrandt. So you just want a scattering of chalk colors like that. So that's where that color is going to be. And let's mix a little gray into that. I'm not bearing down hard at all. This stuff chalks up really easily. Maybe throw just a little white in the mix. And a little lighter gray. And then we're going to come back with our brush. Dip it in the alcohol. And notice I didn't cover the entire wood. I'm not going to cover it. And you know, less is better sometimes with the chalk, but more is better with the alcohol. Get your brush good and wet, and then just rub the chalks in. And the drier your brush is, the darker the chalks are going to be. And you don't want to just sit there and go back and forth and rub it in and make it good. You'll lose that randomness. Let me find a good board. There's a board with the saw marks. Okay, see how distinctive they are now. Here's a board with the knot holes. There's a knot hole there. There's a knot hole there. This board, you know, is just, oh, that has a knot hole in it right there. Very distinct knot hole right there and there. Right there and there. I hope I'm getting this in focus. And notice I'm just doing one side, the side that doesn't have my black mark on it. And that's it. I mean, that's as fast as it goes. All right. And those pieces of wood have that coloration to them. Now I'll take these and let's concentrate a little more on the grays on this set than the browns. That group came out rather tan. So I want a little more defined gray in this set. So I'm going to do a little heavier on my gray. Just a small scattering of black. Some white. And then just a little brown to sort of tie it in with this group. I don't want the pieces to look totally different from each other, but I don't want them to be the same either. Let's see what this. And if you don't like the look you get, go back and do another coat. Now, you see, I told you about that black, how that black just overpowers everything. I just barely hit that black chalk, and look what it did to that piece. And that's a little too black for my taste. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wet my brush and go back in and really wet that. Now it's more toward the grays. I've got a knot hole there. I've got a knot hole there and there. Okay. This one has some nice saw marks on it right there. So now you can see that set of wood and that set of wood are different. But once I mix them up and put them on the side of the barn, it's going to give a very nice, natural kind of random look. So here's a portion of my side of my barn now. This one has some great wood grain. Let me scoot it up here where you can see it better. This has some great dark, heavy wood grain in it. Knot holes. Some saw marks here that turned out well, and some saw marks here. Now I like the saw marks there, but they're not coming out as dark as I want. So what I'm going to do is, like I said, you can go back in and make adjustments. I'm going to put just a little bit more gray right there. See if I can get that saw marks to accept that gray. And that was just really heavily weathered. Let me do this. The more heavily weathered, not weathered, but wood grained the wood is, the less the saw marks are going to show up. Let me find a piece over here that I did not put a real heavy wood grain on, and sort of show you in real time how the saw marks work. Here we go. So we're going to do this. All right, so let's do this one. Sort of a light gray. And then let's see if I can make these saw marks. This one. There they are. There they are. They don't need to be too obvious, and they'll show up even more as it dries, but I've got saw marks down at this end. Maybe you can see there what that looks like. But it definitely gives it a distinctive look when you throw those saw marks in. The knot holes are a little harder to see sometimes, but the saw marks really jump out at you when they're done well. All right, so there's a portion of my barn side, and I'm not going to record the rest of this huge stack of lumber over here. But I'll check back with you after I get the rest of this wood stained up, and we'll take a look at it. So here's what we have. And I have a pretty wide variety of color palette here. I've kind of placed these together in groups that are similar. Right in this section I have more of my blacks and my grays, and toward this end I have a little bit more natural wood color, and then down toward this end it gets just a little redder. And I will place these accordingly. What I may do is put more of the red ones on one side, more of the gray ones on one side, to make them look like the building is weathered a little differently on different sides. But I really like the variety. If you don't like this much variety, just simply don't use that many. Maybe stick to just 2 or 3 shades of chalk. I used, I don't know, about 7 different shades of chalk on this. Do you see my knot holes? Isn't that great? And look at the wood grains. And then let me find some spots with some of those saw marks. Several up here on the top have the saw marks in them. You see those saw marks there? They don't jump out at you, but that's the way it should be. You should have to look for this stuff. It shouldn't be overly done and cartoonish. But look at these knot holes. Does that not look just like a knot hole? That is awesome. I love that knot hole technique. So that's my palette of wood that I have to work with to build this barn structure. It's I think the middle structure. This building is several different structures made to look like it's been built onto and reused for different purposes through the years. And this is the oldest section built of barn wood. So really look, there's some saw marks there. You see those saw marks? And this doesn't take long. I mean, to go from just a stack of strip wood with no character at all to the stack of strip wood with this much character, I've been at this for about 2 hours, and that's all. And that's, I think, 2 hours well worth spending to make this look the way that it does. And once I get these on the walls of the building, it's going to be very authentic looking. All right, I will probably call an end to this video for now. It's I told you it's going to be multi-weeks, and I may even upload more than one a week, depending on how fast I work on this. But I don't want to make it go too long, but I do want to keep you up on the process of what's going on if you'd like to replicate it on some of your own structures. All right, I will leave this with you. Be back next time. I'll be putting these walls together. In the meantime, happy railroading.